Hey everyone, Jack here, and welcome back to History Roundup, a Patreon series where I go over some of the material I didn't end up using in the final video of whatever attraction I'm talking about. This one, of course, is on Space Mountain. Go ahead and check out that video if you haven't seen it yet on the main channel. Otherwise, let's hop right into it. One of my favorite bits of RCA's Space Mountain was how the overall theming was basically a mix between the old-school retrofuturism of 1950s Tomorrowland from Disneyland and the futurism of that era, which was pretty heavily shown later in Epcot Center throughout the early 1980s. A pretty fun piece of music that I really couldn't use was the post-show song, which was basically the Here's to the Future theme from the queue, just now with some added lyrics.
Here's to the future. Here's to the future. Here's to the future and you.
I'll link to a YouTube video in the description where you can listen to the full song in all of its 1970s glory. What I did find particularly interesting was that after Space Mountain lost RCA as a sponsor, they kept the same song and just removed any mentions of the company from it. Here's a quick comparison.
It's a world full of color, a perfect harmony, a world full of music, a living melody. The dreams of tomorrow are beginning today. It's a world of discovery, the world of RCA. There's knowledge and melody. The dreams of tomorrow are beginning today. It's a world of discovery that once seemed far away. There's knowledge and vision.
And now, a couple of images. I'm a pretty big fan of pictures of older attractions from when they were still new, so a few shots of a pearly white Space Mountain are right up my alley. Even better if you can get the contemporary in there as well. That is picturesque, with the People Mover tracks and everything. Speaking of the People Mover, it's worth noting that since it opened not too long before Space Mountain, it was used as a way to preview the attraction before it was finished, since you go through the actual building. Not unlike how some people are still using the People Mover today to preview upcoming Tomorrowland attractions. I guess some things never change. It's pretty easy to forget, but before the mid-70s, Tomorrowland at the Magic Kingdom really wasn't anything that special. It was hardly even complete. Prior to the opening of attractions like Space Mountain, the People Mover, and Carousel of Progress, all of which opened within 1 year of each other, there wasn't that much there. As seen here in a piece of concept art, Space Mountain was essentially the crowning jewel of the land, and one of its last additions before being completed, at least for the time being. I also wanted to talk a bit more about Clem Hall's version of a dome-shaped Space Mountain, which kind of had its own mini-evolution. At first with some spires on top of the entrance and exit area, as well as on top of the dome itself. However, that kind of antenna was later removed, and from there you can see how the idea would later influence the Wonders of Life Pavilion at Epcot, which is pretty similar. The grand opening of Space Mountain was a pretty big deal too. This is back when Disney was all about the spectacle of opening a new attraction, so that means big marching bands on the People Mover tracks, some special guest astronauts, and balloons. A lot of balloons actually. But who could forget the specialist guest there, the mouse himself, now donning a brand new spacesuit. The astronaut version of Mickey was actually a pretty popular character back when they rolled him out, leading to an astronaut version of Goofy as well, but both of these characters were mostly gone by the 1980s. Really, that's about it for all the photos that needed additional context. There are also a few that I just enjoy, like there's a really early version of the launch control you see on the lift hill. This has always been one of my favorite parts, so I'm a little bit biased. I've also got some dedication materials from opening day, the stuff that was handed out to attendees back then, and an old e-ticket where you can see Space Mountain listed as a roller coaster style attraction. Pretty weird to imagine a time when most visitors didn't automatically know what Space Mountain was. And finally, a Disney News article from when the attraction first opened. All the images I use in this video will be available for closer inspection if you follow the link in the description. That'll take you to an Imgur album where you can blow these up, download them, whatever you want. And as always guys, thanks for watching and pledging. The next episode of Keep Epcot Weird will be coming soon. I'll see you then.